Hey guys, welcome to another episode of She Knows Arsenal. This is going to be an extra episode. And as you guys know, you can follow me on Twitter at It's Jessinho on Twitter. So today, instead of doing a Benfica preview, I thought it might be a better idea to maybe talk about something that is kind of outside of just our normal pregame and postgame content on here. And I have some of the guys from the Asylum. If you guys remember a couple of weeks ago, I had the Asylum on the podcast, and we had such a good time on that show. So I wanted to bring them back to have a different type of conversation about how we got to this point as a club. So I'm naming this episode The Decline. And I know that might sound a little doomsday, but we're going to talk about how we got to where we are. And then next week, we're going to talk about how we rebuild for the future. So it's a two-part. It's not going to be super negative. It's not a witch hunt. It's just a conversation between Arsenal fans about how we see the decline of Arsenal for the last 15 years or so. So let's go ahead and get started. Hey guys.
Hey.
What's good?
Hey. So these are, well, except for Steph and Jason, you know, you've seen Jason on another show. I think it was like the transfer deadline day show. And then you've seen Steph on the other episode of She Knows Arsenal with the Asylum. But on the bottom right-hand side, you'll see a new face. Mavi, can you introduce yourself to everybody in the chat and just talk a little bit about yourself and when you became an Arsenal fan and what you do, like in your regular life?
Right. So my name is Mod Russell. I'm another member of the Arsenal Asylum. I'm co-host, aka Kick Up the Arse. You can find me on Twitter. So yeah, I've been blogging for a while for Arsenal. Had a few businesses with a few former Arsenal players back in the day. Grew up born and bred in Northeast London. So Arsenal was my home club. So yeah, I mean, I've been following Arsenal since the late 80s, I would say. Going to matches first with my dad, who used to take me to all the London fixtures that we could attend. And yeah, the old Highbury, the old famous Highbury Library, as they used to call it sometimes. But got to visit there quite a lot. Became a season ticket holder as soon as I was able to afford it. Before that, I was a silver member, which just basically meant that you could have access to games, which became very hard to come by. So yeah, I mean, I got to see Arsenal through the various stages from, you know, the likes of George Graham, Bruce Rioch, Stuart Hewson, Arsene Wenger, Unai Emery, Freddie, and now Arteta's era.
Awesome. Okay. Well, thank you for the information about just kind of like who you are. And, I know you're new to the channel and, you have a lot of good insight that I don't have because obviously I'm not a season ticket holder. I only started watching Arsenal in 2002 when the team was at the peak of its powers. So you're going to have good insight that I can't bring to the table, which is why you're here. So to start the conversation off, I want to start in 2006. So on the heels of our first Champions League final, Ashley Cole, who's a Hale End graduate, actually left the club for London rival Chelsea. And when asked about his controversial move, he said that he left Arsenal because the winning culture had fell apart. So that transition in terms of finding himself in a different culture with the willingness and want to win is why he left to go to Chelsea. And we actually got William Gallas in return for $5 million. And in that same window, I just want to give you guys a scope of who else we lost. We lost Dennis Bergkamp, Robert Pires, Sol Campbell, Jose Antonio Reyes, Lauren, and yeah, so that's quite a bit of high profile players that all left on the heels of a Champions League final, which is strange. And we moved to the Emirates that summer as well. And it was marketed to the fans as a step for the club to catapult to the next level and help us compete with clubs like Barcelona and Bayern Munich. That same season, we came in fourth. Was this the beginning of a new culture at Arsenal where we're selling our players to our rivals and taking their deadwood in exchange and dismantling a great team instead of improving it to continue to compete? I mean, we went 9 years without a trophy after this. What do you think, Jason? Was this the start of a new culture?
I think we have to kind of give acknowledgement to what Roman Abramovich did to the league. There's a lot of things that are outside of our scope that played out, right? And unfortunately, in having a visionary coach, when you're the first to do things, people learn from your mistakes and your missteps. And too much of us are blaming, oh, we may have jumped the gun, but in trying to prepare ahead and in trying to hold FFP to account, we just fell by the wayside, right? The powers that be and the machine is much bigger, and a lot of things have changed revenue-wise over the years. So, I think we have to put that into context.
What do you think, Maud? How do you feel about the culture? Was this the start of the culture shift, do you think? Because this is pretty, commonplace for us now to sell our best players to our rivals and actually take their deadwood in exchange.
Yeah, I mean, this question is just multifaceted. So, if we're gonna go for start where you started, which was Ashley Cole, right? He's lying. Basically, Ashley Cole was offered £5,000 less than what he wanted a week, and he couldn't believe that they were haggling over that. Obviously, Chelsea were waiting in the wings, willing to pay him the money that he wanted, and he left. Had Arsenal had given him the money that he required or requested, I don't think he would have gone. So that's the first one. Second one, obviously, you mentioned the likes of Bergkamp leaving. Bergkamp at that point was old and retired. Like, that was it. Like, that was his final season. And the season we moved to the Emirates, it was open. The Emirates was open with a Bergkamp testimonial. Unfortunate still to have that shirt from that day. So that was that. Pires, again, I think he went to Villarreal after that, if I remember correctly.
He did.
And, he was in the twilight years of his career. Reyes was homesick from the start. Brilliant player. R.I.P. Reyes. But bottom line is he never quite settled. Rather like Lucas Torreira now, he didn't really settle in London. So those are those. That's that. And then what Jason alluded to was spot on, because nobody foresaw what Abramovich was going to bring to the league. One person did, David Dean, and he was trying to get Usmanov on board. And that's when him and Fistman had a massive falling out. Danny Fitzman, who was also a director at Arsenal at the time, and actually brought David Dean on board in the first place to Arsenal. So the whole thing, moving to the new stadium, that was seen as being something that could catapult us onto the next stage and make us self-sustainable. Big fan base, big club. Worldwide, we're a much bigger club than Chelsea. Far deeper history, won the league more times. We were just a much bigger club at that time. So it was seen that, we could pack up the stadium and we could become, the next, Juve or Real or Barca or, Bayern or whatever. The problem is they didn't factor in A, oligarchs taking over clubs, and B, TV money, and the value that TV money would have to clubs throughout the world, to the point where, you didn't even need to have 60,000 people in your stadium because the money that was offered by TV revenue was far more expensive.
That's a good point. Steph, I want to bring you in here. I don't want to shut you out of this. I want to get your perspective on just this time at Arsenal and kind of the shift moving to the Emirates, the money coming into the league, you know, how that changed how Arsenal operated and ultimately how it changed us as a club, you know.
Yeah. I'm not sure I can add on too much more that's been said by Mud and Jason, really. But what I have seen, also what I read, and the Bulgarian gunner just highlighted as well about Wenger coming out and saying that that he knew he had to sell a star player every season to help fund for the stadium. Now, for me, that bothers me because if you're saying we're moving to the Emirates to compete with the Bayerns and the Barcelonas, but then now you're coming out years later saying that you knew you had to sell a star player every season, then ultimately we're never going to compete with them guys because Bayern and Barcelona would never have to sell their key or star players. So that bothers me a little bit. Yeah, not like.
Can I jump in on something real quick, stuff? And I want y'all to, because y'all live in the UK, right? And I'm in New York and he's in LA. There's something about the way you guys do loans, right? Like business loans that are a little bit more tricky and much more intricate, right? And a lot of clauses and a lot of nets, you know, like I think there's a loan that we took out on the Emirates that required Wenger to be there as the coach for us to be able to get that loan, right? Yeah. And then the stipulation in that loan that we had to have X amount of money in reserves. Right now, this is on the Arsenal level. Could you at least break down on like the normal day-to-day living in the UK level that these types of loans are like present in your culture, right? It's a little bit trickier. It's not as straightforward as getting money. There's always some kind of cap.
I think it varies on the type of loan you're getting and what you're getting a loan towards. Now, like with this, I feel like with the amount of loan that they probably wanted on this occasion, Wenger, the money that they required and the fortitude of it, they required Wenger to, it's like a what do you call it, like a guarantor, a bit like that. So Wenger acted as a guarantor for us to now get the loan to subsidize. So it's not uncommon. I'll say it's uncommon in terms of like possibly in terms of a business and so forth. But in terms of a guarantor loan, I don't think that they felt that Arsenal had the required credit without Arsene Wenger to subsidize a loan. I may be wrong, but Mud may be a better person to respond to that. But that's my take on it.
Yeah, no, you are right. Basically, the bottom line was the banks weren't comfortable with giving the money to Arsenal unless Wenger could say 100% that he was going to be there for a set amount of time, a set period. And I think it was a matter of about 10 years or something that he basically had to sign on the dotted line. And it was basically the banks wanted to guarantee a return on investment. And they weren't confident at the time into thinking if Arsene Wenger was to leave a couple of years later, that basically Arsenal would still be able to continue the trajectory that they were on at that particular time. And guarantee us, challenging for titles, top 4 spots, and obviously the economic, wherewithal that we could have to not only but to continue to compete, but also to service the debt. That was basically it at the time. And Arsenal, because of the way it was structured and because of the choices that they made, with who they were going to get to act as the backers, it became very, very, very obvious as time went on and the game started to change that just wasn't going to be enough.
So, like, to Andrew's point, right? And let's not factor in the time. Wasn't that right after the financial crisis? So weren't, the specifics of getting a loan and having a guarantor, especially in the UK, a bit more stringent? Like America, we get loans crazily easily, right?
No, it wasn't, because it was what I
Okay,
think.
cool.
I think we moved over at 2005, and the financial crisis was 2007 your end, and it kind of hit us 2008 here. So no, it wasn't. It wasn't quite then there. And to be honest with you, had it been later on, we probably would have been better off, because interest rates started to drop. And when we look back on that deal in hindsight, we can see that it wasn't actually a very good deal. Hence, if we fast forward now, Kroenke just basically wiped out the debt and somehow restructured it. God only knows what the real story is of what he's done. But, you know, bottom line is, when we look at it in hindsight, it probably wasn't that great a deal, you know.
Were we
So,
desperate for that deal, though? You know, like, did we need to? Did we have to move from our spiritual home of Highbury? Was it necessary?
in hindsight, no, we didn't, because
Okay.
in hindsight, the fact that we've got, I don't know, you look at Liverpool, it's not stopped them from competing. Liverpool hasn't moved. You know, and Tottenham has managed to redevelop their same stadium in situ. We moved across the road. All right, fair enough. It's not a million miles away, but without that, that kind of history, that disconnect that we had. And funny enough, we was having a debate in our old famous WhatsApp group, and Steph, you know, was saying about Highbury, whether it was an intimidating place or it wasn't. And, you know, it could be argued. Obviously, Highbury used to be called Highbury Library, but I guarantee the Emirates is 10 times worse in terms of our atmosphere. And what you used to have in Highbury is that a lot of teams were basically beaten before they even got on the turf. And it wasn't just under the Wenger years, that happened under the Graham years as well. The atmosphere, the intensity, the closeness of the crowd to not only to the pitch, but also as the players were coming into the stadium and walking through, and where the changing rooms were. The changing rooms were on the east stand on Avenel Road, and basically where the marble halls were. And basically, as people were walking down the street, the fans were walking down the street chanting and saying whatever. The opposition could hear them in the changing rooms. They can hear them literally word for word. Yeah, literally past the window of the changing rooms. And no one can ever kind of replicate that kind of feeling. And certainly not in a huge, you know, stadium like the Emirates is.
Yeah, for sure. Those are all really, really good points. So I want to stick with you, Maud, just for a little bit longer, because you have such good insight on this. But David Dein exited the club in 2007 and was replaced by Gazidis in 2009. Cesc Fabregas said that the club was never the same once David Dein left. Why was David Dein so significant for Arsenal in that time? What did we miss out on by not having him at the club longer? What happened there?
I mean, David Dein, first and foremost, was a fan. He's a fan that got lucky in a way with his relationship with Fitzman and having the opportunity to invest at Arsenal. And I think the level he invested at, it was something stupid. I think it was like 50 grand, or, you know, it's crazy money in today's era. So when he came on board with Fitzman, he was passionate about the club. He loved the club. He loved the club as a fan, first and foremost. And therefore he saw buying players and developing the team and that kind of stuff as a fan, first and foremost. Later on, obviously, when he was ousted, there was obviously talk of the fact that his son is an agent for, or became an agent for, quite a lot of the star players. And was there maybe a conflict of interest? And then on top of that, he obviously wanted Usmanov to take the reins. And obviously Fitzman and Wenger and the rest of them were more comfortable with someone like Silent Stan, who seemed to be a lot more conservative. And they were fearful of the oligarch kind of coming in, or the so-called Russian gangster coming in, or Uzbekistan gangster. So yeah, they were fearful of that, and because of that, there became somewhat of an internal struggle, a battle at the club, and eventually David Deans became less and less influential and was slowly but surely forced out of the club.
Yeah. Wow. I think with everything, it's never just one thing with Arsenal. Like, you could look at every single situation and look at it from multiple sides. Like, somebody can be so influential and a legend of the club, but also have faults as well. And I think we're seeing that with, figures like David Dean and figures like Arsene Wenger.
Spot on.
When you go, oh, go ahead.
Yo, what's up with the was it sponsorship deals, right? Like, how Man United has like a toilet bowl cleaner in Japan and stuff like that, right? Like, how did we miss out on that boat, even though we were the first ones to jump forward, right? We had the biggest deal when it came to shirt sponsorships, right? That 10-year deal we locked in, there was a funny deal we locked in with Nike to guarantee as a guarantor for the Emirates, right?
Yeah.
How did we start being the first team to think about, new stadium development? And then, get really lucrative marketing deals on certain things. But then at the end of the day, we didn't get enough toilet bowl cleaners in like Malaysia.
No, I mean, Man United's a totally different kettle of fish. I mean, they are, arguably top 3, top 5 in the world, aren't they, in terms of clubs? I mean, Arsenal, whether we like it or not, I've always said it, we're a big fan base, but in terms of the European or global scene, we're not really even top 10 in terms of, the teams that have won the Champions League or, won numerous titles back to back, and certainly not in recent history. You got to look at British clubs or even the English clubs, let's say in the EPL, that have won and some that are no longer even in the EPL, like Nottingham Forest and Aston Villa. I mean, they won the European Cup, which is now the Champions League. Arsenal's never even won it. Arguments should say we should have won it on 2 occasions under Wenger. But the fact of the matter is we didn't. And because of that, it's never kind of quite taken us on the upper echelon of sort of commercial viability. Whereas Man United, their history is just it's crazy. And in terms of their fans and their fan base, they are able to sell toilet cleaners or toilet bowls, branded in Malaysia or wherever, or all these other kind of stuff. So they were the first to kind of start that multi-sponsorship thing where you saw that their training kits had different emblems and different sponsorship than their actual, the kit, that their first team kits and their second kits that were playing on match day. Yeah, exactly. But we started to do that. I mean, with Rwanda and all these other things that we're starting to see all these little sponsors pop up here and there and stuff. And, you're starting to see that on the training kits as well. So we are starting to do that.
Yeah. So I want to pivot just a little bit and talk a little bit about the trophyless years. I think that's where I want to go with the conversation next, because again, this entire move to the Emirates was marketed to us as, what the next step that we needed to start competing, and we went 9 years without a trophy. But to what Steph said, he brought up something that I wanted to talk about, was that recent interview that Arsene Wenger did with BN Sports, where he said that this is what he said: "I did it every year, sell players. We had to pay off the stadium at the time, and we had to be top 4, but we also had to pay off the mortgage." Cesc and Nasri were sold in 2011, and Robin Van Persie was sold to Manchester United in 2012, and they were placed with, I pulled this up, Gervinho, Joel Campbell, Park Chu-young, Andre Santos, Mikel Arteta, and, for me, I'm just trying to figure out, how do we rationalize moving from Highbury to the Emirates to compete and having to sell players to keep from going bankrupt? We moved to compete with Barcelona and Bayern Munich, but we sold Cesc to Barcelona, Robin Van Persie to our biggest rivals in Manchester United, and Nasri to Manchester City, who would eventually replace us permanently as a top 4 club. we qualified for Champions League almost every year under Wenger. So I'm trying to figure out, where do we rationalize this? Where did the money go? How do we go? How are we bankrupt? How do we have to sell our players in order to keep the lights on? But we move to compete. How does this even make sense? Steph, what do you think about that? Like, what is your thought process on this? Because you kind of touched on it earlier.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if they sold the players to keep the lights on, if that makes sense. Like, I feel that we're like a what's the word? We're what's the word? Like accountants, shall I say? They like to balance the books. So I don't really necessarily think that we needed to sell the players to pay for the stadium per se, because then there's a lot of conflict in terms of what players say and what Arsene Wenger's come out and said. In terms of like Van Persie for once said that he spoke to the manager and said that he wants to be told, are we going to have players to compete? Are we buying players to compete? If not, I'm getting off. Whereas Arsene Wenger's come out and said, well, no, I had to sell Van Persie to pay for the stadium. So like it's two complete different arguments. So I'm like, I don't necessarily feel we needed to sell the players, but I feel that in terms of the board, Wenger was forced to sell the players to balance the books, rather than we had to sell them to keep the lights on, so to speak.
Do you think that there was some personal gain for Arsene in this? You know, it's been suggested that, you know, the Kroenkes would, you know, reward Arsene for, you know, keeping us under budget and making top 4 every year. Does that sound like a realistic thing, or just, you know, a conspiracy theory?
I think well, obviously I think him getting top 4, there will be incentives in that, especially with the squad depleting every season and he's still managing to get it. This whole top 4 feat, it bothers me as well, because again, like when we was making top 4, personally, there was only really 4 clubs that could make it. It's only when like they only made it for 5 teams when Liverpool won the Champions League, but got knocked out of Europa. I mean, got knocked out of the top 4, so they had to make Liverpool come into the Champions League because they wanted them to feel they can defend their trophy. So there was only really 4 teams that could win it, that could enter the top 4. It's only when the other clubs behind us started getting better, it showed how weak we was getting, or highlighted how weak we was getting, which is when we started falling 4th and then 5th, and then people saying, "Oh yeah, we was always on the low." But I don't like, we can say that, but we was constantly making top 4 for 16 years, like comfortably. It wasn't struggling to make top 4. But I feel that once the other clubs got stronger, it just highlighted how weak we were becoming. But yeah, like the trophyless season it is mad. Like
9 years.
9 years, and it wasn't so much. It wasn't so much 9 years. I wasn't really bothered about it because we were getting close. It was just I think what bothered me more is that we wasn't competing. I don't mind not winning a trophy. It bothers me that we don't compete to win a trophy.
Yeah,
with me more.
So let me ask you this question, Steph. If you say the last season, right? If getting 4th is 33 million by place, right, in the Premier League, and becoming number 1 is 38 million, can you understand their rationale a little bit? If the difference between top being number 1 and being 4th place, right, is 5 million, does it make sense to spend 100 million in a transfer window in order to compete?
It does if that's what you promised. If that's what you promised, you said when you say compete, you're talking about winning stuff. Competing is not being, 10 points adrift.
Yeah,
you know what I mean.
Competing doesn't mean compete.
Right?
No.
On a technical level.
I think we were competing for top 4. We were never competing for to win the
Yeah.
Premier League,
Like-
and that's the
Yeah.
difference.
But my point is, we're going back. We could use 2020's numbers, but let's use the numbers of the day, right? At that time, David Silva, who was the other player? Mata was a $25 million player, right?
Yeah.
The quality of that player was 25 million. Do you think where we were spent financially, especially at the birthing of the Emirates and starting to get into that era, was it worth it spending the 75 and potentially being able to move up one or two places? Or was it worthwhile? Again, I'm just looking at Wenger's point of view, right? Was it worthwhile for him to keep that 50, keep that 25 million, and just get us into top four so we can sustain and maintain?
Basically, what
Yeah.
you're saying is Arsenal is a business and it's not a sport.
But
It's
that's
not about
what-
sport. It's about business.
So
This
when
is
you
the-
Saying.
go, man.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're spot on, but then what we were missing is everyone forgot that Wenger's had a masters, I should say, in economics. So Wenger was always about the money and what made sense. And then there's Arsenal's obsession with Billy Bean and Moneyball.
Before, like
Moneyball.
Anelka,
And yeah, it was always like that. It was always like that. The Anelka thing was, they would have liked to have kept Anelka.
I'm not talking about
he
getting a player for that cheap, right? Wasn't that the Arsenal way? Getting a player that no one thought about twice for some ridiculous fee. Like, wasn't Van Persie 1.5 million because he was a trouble child?
Yeah. But Van Persie was also very young. I think we came to us at about 19, I think, or 20. I can't remember the exact age, but he was very, very young when he came to us. I think he was still playing for the under-21s and verging on the senior squad for the Dutch. But basically, Wenger's always had an eye on the money and what makes sense. When we sold Anelka, even though he didn't want to sell Anelka, financially it made sense, and they went and got the player that they ideally wanted to partner up with Anelka in the 4-4-2, which was Thierry Henry. It's a tricky one, really, because
So let me say something. Bulgarian Guna made a good point, right? 2008, 2010, 11, and 14. We always had that. You know how that team was. We got to like halfway through the season. We were like,
we're going to talk about the season, the season that got away. We will talk about that next.
Not to say that, but like us in the transfer window. Remember, we always used to be like, we got like the calendar year, Arsenal will be number one in points, but during the season we weren't, right?
But most of the time we were like one player away when we would get through those cycles. So would paying 25 million for a freaking center back, just one center back, wouldn't that be enough? Like, we're talking about the difference between trophies and not trophies. A lot of these teams were good enough. They just were missing one or two players. I don't see the issue unless Arsenal is a business and we no longer care about competing. And that whole time, they were just lying to the fans to make us feel okay about moving to a bigger stadium because it was all about business, and that's it.
Yeah, I don't know if it always was, because I look at the season, and maybe Steph can remember the exact date. It's passing me by, but the season where Eduardo got injured, I think Ramsey got injured, I think Fabregas got injured. It was just ridiculous. We were getting bones, Diaby. I think we were getting bones broken and ligaments going and all sorts. That it was horrific. And that season was the season, I think it was 2008. Yeah, someone's just put GK 2008. We should have won that league hands down, and we didn't. I mean, the next time that I think if we would have won that season, then we would have been able to push on to that next level. I think we could have added a couple of marquee players to that, and then I think we would have dominated for a period of time. But I just think it just didn't pan out. And it wasn't necessarily his fault. It was tragic that season because I literally thought that we would run away with it. And the football we were playing was unbelievable. It's out of this world. Eduardo was on fire.
So I think the next time with that, think about that though. The referees remember we were getting kicked off the pitch, right? There were seasons where we know that the strategy for beating Arsenal between Bolton, Stoke, and any of our bogey teams was to kick us, right? What happened to that?
Yeah, I mean, but there was no protection from the referees, and it's funny now because I'm listening to some of the referees that were of that era talk about their bias for Man United, and it was clear. You could see the bias was clear. You could watch football and say, "Hold on a minute, this guy gets kicked. It's a foul straight away." or Scholes could go around mistiming tackles left, right, and centre, and no one would say nothing. And then obviously, if one of ours did it, they were getting a yellow card or a red card straight away. And and also that kind of thing that they had for foreign managers at the time, you know, and the fact that the foreigners and this, that, and the other, because it was that era. Don't forget, Wenger changed a lot.
Please tap into that. That's always been something that I've been afraid to bring up, because you don't want to get into it's a really straightforward conversation that we changed the league with having so many foreign players and Black players at that time. And it wasn't necessarily, you know, something that other people wanted to see. You know, they liked the traditional English whiter teams. Like, that's what it looked like to me. The foreign player thing was a real, you know, against the grain for the Premier League at that time. And we were definitely on the other side of the line on that one.
I don't know. Sorry, man. I don't know if it was just Arsenal, because I remember Man U had quite a few key players that were foreign.
They had an English base, though. They had an English or British base. If you look, you had Scholes, you had Beckhams, you had Roy Keane, who's Irish, you know, Giggs, Welsh, you know, and then he looked at Pallister, Bruce, you know, all of those guys there. They had a core English base, and they were seen as flying the flag for Great Britain. You know, they had a Scottish manager. You know, so it was all very much British, made in Britain. And then there was have the sprinkling of the Cantonars and the, you know, the little bit of flair and you know, the European talent in
the acceptable amount. The acceptable amount. The sprinkle.
It was almost like the three foreigner rule, which they used to have back in the day for clubs, where they could only have 3 foreign players, and that was it. You know, but whereas Arsene, it was just like, I don't care whether you're British or not. You know, if you're good enough, you're in the team. And Arsenal always had that anyway, because, you know, even when one of the reasons I started supporting Arsenal is I could go there and see so many players that looked like me. I could go in the crowd and see people in the crowd that looked like me. And I didn't hear, there might have been, but I never heard any racist abuse. I did down the lane at the lane, you know. So for me, it always made me feel like home. So going back to that, I always thought there was an element of that Wenger kind of, that xenophobia that Wenger got. And if you looked at some of the headlines in the press and this, and he was always getting targeted left, right, and centre. And I think that did somehow seep onto the pitch. And some of them, like I said, some of the referees that you hear now quite openly say that they have biases, whereas we all knew at the time, but we thought, you know, you couldn't really say it too openly. But now they're sort of starting to admit it. So it's interesting.
Yeah. Steph, did you have anything else you want to add to that before we move on to the next thing?
Not really. Yeah, I was just thinking. Obviously, I was going to say that. I don't necessarily remember Arsenal ever buying key players like that. We never really went out and bought marquee players. So that extra 20, like Jason was talking about, the 25 million or the 50 million that Wenger was keeping behind because he didn't see that it's worth it for the extra 5 million. It wasn't. I don't necessarily feel that Wenger was doing that. It was just necessarily. I just feel that Wenger had a philosophy where he didn't feel that he needed to spend 25 million to get the same quality player that he could find for 2 million or 3 million, so to speak. So yeah, like I said, the first marquee, like before what's his name, Ozil, the highest transfer player. Who was it? Arshavin. For like 12 minutes or something like that. And that's so from Arshavin to Ozil, like what? It's a 30 million pound gap. So Wenger was never really about splashing out for talent. He literally just went out and found his talent. And so I was never mad at Wenger for not paying let's say marquee prices. I was more bothered about him not what's the word? Replacing the talent that we lost.
Let me ask you this question. Remember that time we lost Cesc? Wasn't Mata or David Silva like an automatic built-in replacement? And then Chelsea gets him that set season. He becomes their player of the year. And then didn't they win the Europa League that year?
Yeah.
Like some cut paste type players that we saw that were, Mata was the type of player that needed the team to be built around him. He was basically a carbon copy of Cesc, just a little bit slower, a little bit smaller, but essentially like the football brain was there.
Do you think
don't replace?
I don't think Mata was a replacement for Cesc. Like, I think Mata and Silva are in the same mold, but I wouldn't have put Cesc in that mold. I would have said Cesc is more of Mata's an attacking midfielder. Like, I would say Mata is a bit more like Santa Cazorla, and Santa just literally reverted to a centre mid due to injuries and him also having a footballing brain to be able to play that position. But it was a mad season for Wenger. But what do you guys think about him staying as long as he did?
We're gonna get to that.
Okay.
We're gonna get to that. Yeah, we're gonna talk about that. That's the finale, apparently.
Okay.
So now let's just fast forward a little bit to 2014 when the trophy drought ended and we won the FA Cup. And then in 2015, the 2015-16 season, we finished in second behind Leicester. And I always call this the season that got away. It was devastating because we went for so long without being even remotely competitive. And this time it felt like we were close, but I mean, really Leicester ran away with it towards the end of the season. This team had Ozil, Ramsey, Wilshere, Sanchez, Corzola, Koscielny, very, very good team. And some fans felt like we fell short that season because we didn't have a striker that was up to the caliber of a title, challenging team. And the summer prior, we didn't bring in a single outfield player. We brought in Peter Cech, so the next season after that, we had actually fell out of the top four for the very first time with a team that had just came in second place. Is this another example of Arsenal just not building around their core? Like, this team could have won the Premier League title, could it have not, the next season if we had been more ambitious? Steph, what do you think about that?
Yeah, we should have won the top four. We should have won the title that season. I was like, I get a lot of stick in the Arsenal Asylum group because they call me a Leicester City fan, but I was probably the one person that was mad when Leicester won the league that season. Like, they were chanting around, parading throughout Leicester, and I was in my room vexed, like, because that should have been it should have been us. Like, there's no way Leicester should have won it that season, but unfortunately they did. And yeah, like, it's just losing it. We missed the striker. That's literally all we missed. We had everything else. The defense weren't as strong, but at the time we didn't really need as strong as a defense because our attack was just so deadly. And we had a lot of, our squad was quite, I wouldn't say quality in depth, but it was quality in everyone was willing to do their job and everyone could do their job well to a satisfactory standard. Like the Welbecks and the Wilsheres and people like that just come out and they literally put their performance on the line.
So that 40 and 1, that 40 pounds plus 1, that came back to bite us in that season, didn't it?
100%. Like, I don't get. That's what Wenger needs to talk to me about. I want to know the logic behind that, like why he felt like, because that to me that's a piss take. Like, to say 40. Sorry.
Right. What about the morality years, right? When the years that we weren't challenging, but we were making top four. We could say we're doing it the Arsenal way. We played beautiful football, right? Didn't we have like some kind of intrinsic, like internal, like, again, we were battling Chelsea, we were battling Man City on fronts, right? Financially, that we weren't even able to match. Then Manchester United got even better at their own, revenue generating model. Even though they're in debt, they just know how to manipulate FFP, right? If you get enough sponsorship of toilet bowls and paper napkins in random, territories, you can spend as much as you want, but still be in debt, right? So they found the loophole out of FFP too. But weren't we always there on some morality level? Like, oh yeah, I support Arsenal and we used to wear this badge out here. Like, yeah, we played the best football in the league, but we never
doesn't win trophies. I mean, we're sitting there 15 years later crying about not getting the trophies.
Would you have rather have been Chelsea? The real question is, I think that the Asylum had this, we went back and forth. would we trade our souls to be Chelsea? Essentially, what we have to really ask ourselves.
So should we, if we would have brought in Usmanov and we were doing Chelsea-like things like replacing players and, you know, being able to go into the transfer market and create a title challenging team every 2 to 3 seasons?
Yes.
Yeah, I would.
But to be fair,
I would.
But then at the same time, Man United never did it the Chelsea way. Man United.
But look what they sold. Yo, dude, if you tell me that Man United is in debt, but they're able to sell, you know what I mean, again, napkins and nappies in, like, again, India or wherever they are selling their territorial, like, name, you can't tell me that they're doing something wrong. Like, they're just smart. They're Americanizing the soccer model, pretty much what it is.
Yeah, they are. But you have to think, though, Cristiano Ronaldo, they bought him for 12 million. Now, to buy Cristiano for 12 million, look at the player that he look at the player that they managed to get him.
We bought Anelka for 80,000 and we sold for 22 million the next year. Like,
that's what I'm saying. That's only one player we've ever done that with, though.
Yo, son, we sold Ox for 40 million, bro.
Yeah, come on, okay. But Ox for 40 million, that you're not really getting a great player for 40 million.
I don't care if he's not here.
No. What I'm saying is you can sell Ox for 40 million, but to find a replacement player for 40 million, you're not going to find that greater player.
You know what? You're right in the sense that we've not had really astute transfer business, right? If you told me, like, one of the stories that always sticks to me, and I bring it up in the Asylum, is the fact that we swapped getting N'Golo Kante because of his entourage, right? And we opted for Granit Xhaka, who was the good guy who gave his money to his parents to, you know what I mean, use his wages. Like, the logic behind that bugs me out because you sacrificed the talent who you knew was league ready and was exactly what you would have needed in that mold. And you opted for, again, whatever morality clause you saw to be much more viable for you. My point is that how many times have we done that? Like, we did Mustafi off of, like, analytics, right? And we should have gotten a Virgil van Dijk. But what happened with the scouting report? He comes across as lackadaisical, right? That was literally what our scout said about VVD when he was at Celtic. And we all saw him as a stallion. So, like, we can't have it both ways, fam.
Yeah, I agree. But this is why I struggle to, like, our scouting system. Is it as great as it is? Because really, like I was always saying, like when the players come into the end of their contract, you should be able to find a replacement that fits that mold. We never, like, all the players that we've lost, we'd never had a replacement. Like David Seaman, we lost. We'd never had a great keeper of that standard. Lehman, I don't necessarily think he was, but he was decent. Our left back, Ashley Cole, we lost him. And then look how many left backs we've had.
He's a generational talent.
No, that's what I'm saying. But all our players that we've had, we've never replaced them. Like Seth Fabregas.
Nacho Man. Nacho Man. Nacho was Nacho Man.
No. He's a squad player. He's literally a squad player. But he just done well.
You can't call Nacho a squad player. Come on, that's rude.
I mean, when I say he's a squad player, like he wouldn't get into. I don't think he gets into anyone else's top into left back position. He only gets into ours.
Really?
Yeah.
Kieran Gibbs is, right? They're like, he can make England if he plays for Arsenal, but he won't make England if he plays for any other team in the league.
Who's that?
Okay, Kieran Gibbs, right? We have a tendency to make people stars, and then they can't really replicate that form for someone else.
Yeah. Gibbs,
Gibbs is not a star.
We lost Patrick Vieira. Like, there's too many big names.
But is it we lost them, or did Arsene trust too much? Like, didn't he? Like, how many years did we rely on again? Y'all be getting at me on the group about this, but I'm not keen on Hleb. I'm not keen on Rosicky. I'm not keen on our memories of Diaby. Wilshire, right? We kept on holding out for.
Wait. Leave Wilshire out.
No. My point in saying so is that Wenger Wenger's strength was his relationship with his players, right? And them believing in him and him believing in them, and him allowing them to say, hey, guess what? That number 4 position, that jersey, that's for you. When you get healthy, you come here. Then Diaby has that game against Liverpool, and guess what? He's like a worldie. Then he breaks down, and we're waiting another 6 months for another game like that. Like, yo, we held how many seasons hostage to somebody else's body? Rosicky's the same thing. Oh, yo, we've never seen Thomas Rosicky the way he was for Dortmund, and I was a Rosicky fan. but we call him an Arsenal legend. Like, no, he wasn't.
Ain't nobody calling him no legend.
No one calls him that.
Yo, y'all are out here burning murals into this. This guy's
No, we're not. Who? Receipts. Receipts. I've never said anything about Rosicky except for he was a player that came here and just was in between years. That
we got to a point we were celebrating mediocrity to a point in which these people are giving like standing ovations when they return. That's what I'm trying to get at. Like,
okay,
that Hleb got to respect. Yo, y'all is crazy to me. That's messed up.
Enough.
Ma, you was in the stadium. You did that.
Were you there, Maud? You're muted. There you go.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm out of jail now.
Go.
Yeah. So what are you saying now? Natural. We're talking Rosicky. It's like everyone's getting.
We celebrate talent. Like, Bulgarian Guna came out. Diaby story is a tragedy. Such a talent. How many times have we said that? That's Jack.
Yeah. But the thing is, Diaby. Listen, Diaby. The amount of times I sat there from Highbury to the Emirates and saw Diaby play, and literally his footwork it was so brilliant for such a tall guy. He could literally glide past players. The techers was unbelievable. But again, he's another one suffered a horrific tackle. Again, no protection from the referees. Again, because of that, in my opinion, that bias that Arsenal couldn't take it up them. They couldn't have a game against a typical English side that wanted to give them a few kicks and whatever. So we fell foul to that. Rosicky was another talented player. And again, I saw some brilliant moments from him. But again, he suffered from injury. Same goes for Santi Cazorla. The list is endless. I mean, Jack Wilshere, again, he's another one. Didn't fulfill his potential down to injuries. And I know we've talked about that in the past. And, could Arsenal have managed it better? I don't think they could, because, again, it was down to his running style. And I don't think they could have ever changed the way that he ran, because it
Who's that, sorry?
Wilshere.
I heard about that.
Yeah, so the fact that he used to run on the sides of his feet, so he used to put stress down his ankles and certain parts of his legs, and they just used to give way after a time. And the fact of the matter is, if you look at it now, the way he turns, it's almost like his feet are on the outside of the instep. So therefore, after years and years and years of playing like that and learning to play football in a very beautiful way, all of a sudden he's getting injured, his body's breaking down. Like, what do we tell him? Stop playing like that, learn how to play football again. You can't, it's too late. There's nothing you can do about it, So the bottom line is, we have had problems where people have even looked and thought, is it something that Arsenal were doing internally? Obviously, Ramsey's another one. Is it something Arsenal's doing internally? Is it something that the doctors and the physios are not getting right? Is it something to do with diet? Is it something to do with Wenger's training methods? What is it? And then no one can ever pinpoint it, And then you look at some other players, like you look at the likes of a player that I can name now who never seems to get injuries, like Aubameyang. Throughout his career, people can probably count the injuries on one hand. He very rarely is missing a game due to injury, So maybe it's something that was happening within the club, but we're still yet to find out.
Yeah, it feels like, we're talking about this, that we were identifying talent and trying to do things the Arsenal way, like bringing in, maybe players that were a little bit, maybe a little bit further along in their careers, or they're young players. And we were hoping to be able to build squads several times, but injuries really took that away from us. That's what it really sounds like, is we were identifying the talent. It's not like these players were not talented.
We were raiding Barcelona's academy, left, right, and center, right? Who do we have? Fran Merida, we had Cesc Fabregas, we had John Torrell Harper, we had, who else? I know I'm forgetting another two or three players.
That kid, right?
If you want, pardon?
The center back, Miguel, right? Ignacy Miguel or something?
Ignacy Miguel as well. We were raiding their academy, left, right, and center, trying to get their talent. Bottom line is, for one reason or another, it didn't really pan out. You even look at the likes of who we were talking about the other day, the striker that we had, Vela,
Eduardo?
Carlos
Vela.
Vela as well. We ended up going to Spain. We got him from Mexico. We were getting Brazilian wonder kids over from Brazil. Again, they weren't working out. And I wasn't referring to Denilson, by the way. But certainly weren't no wonder kid. But yeah, you know, we Arsenal were trying to think. They were trying to kind of identify the players young and early, and then bring them on as a place which some teams are doing now. If you look, we will play you. It doesn't matter if you're young and if you're good enough, you'll play. It doesn't matter how young you are. And that was what Arsene was doing. And, you know, we started that with Vieira. I remember being there when Vieira made his debut off the bench at Highbury at 19 years old. And he was just head and shoulders above anyone that I'd seen at that particular time. He broke the mold. Nobody thought that a centre midfield player could be tall and lanky and rangy and have the amount of skill that he had and athleticism. In those days, centre-backs all was like short, stocky fellas, you know, that like to kick lumps out of you. So, you know, Arsene gets a bit of stick, but, you know, you got to give credit where credit's due. Just, I think someone put in the comments, I can't remember who, and I think it's valid. I just don't think that maybe he adapted with the game quickly enough.
Who's that?
I think
Wenger.
I think I get what he's saying, but that's also a part of the Emperor's New Clothes situation, right? We didn't put somebody in place like a Dean for him to have a foil, so he can have another football mind to kind of speak that over with. Because in him having so much power, right, he wasn't moved. I thought Arsene could have allowed, like, wasn't there a season in which Jurgen Klopp got available, then Pep got available, and I think we may have won an FA Cup the year before in between. And that's like one of those perfect moments in which, you know, Wenger could have gracefully gone into the board.
We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about that. But yeah, definitely. I think that there's so many different factors. So again, we're going back to the conversation about Wenger being so influential and a legend in his own right, but also having faults, you know, and just some unluckiness as well. You know, so it's not just about one thing or the other. I think it's a combination of so many different factors: financially, recruitment, unluckiness, stubbornness, that really led us to such a long time without actually being able to truly compete. So Arsene left the club after finishing sixth during our 2017-2018 season. And as important and influential as Arsene was to the success of the club for 20 years, there kind of was like a quiet whisper of truth that he should have avoided tarnishing his legacy by leaving earlier when things were a little bit better. When should Arsene have left, and how did him staying past his best change how you felt about him, if it did at all? Steph, I'll go to you first.
See, this is all mad now, because I was saying personally, I felt like Wenger should have left. See Mod's face.
Okay. Time for this, but
yeah, personally, I feel like Wenger should have left 2012. 2012, maybe 2013. I feel like he should have left. But at the same time, after talking about the Emirates and him getting a loan and him being a guarantor for it, I know that him leaving in 2012, 2013 was never going to be an option, because it was a 10-year loan and he was a guarantor for it. So ultimately, he was going to be there until when he left, which is what, 2018, 2017, 2018 he left, or 2017, 16 he left, isn't it? So he was always going to be there. So I don't think, like, the only way we can get away from Wenger is if we didn't do the Emirates switch, because Wenger was so influential in the Emirates switch and the loan to it. We could never get away from him.
Wow.
So, but personally, if Wenger wasn't attached to the loan, I feel Wenger he did some good things. Like we got second place in 2015-16 season. And he brought in the likes of Ozil, and he could still attract good players. Ozil, the Sanchez, the Santa Cazorla. Like he still brought in talent. with next to nothing resources. It was just that the type of for me, the type of football that he was playing, or the tactics compared to games, he didn't adjust enough. And that was my gripe. He did it for one game, like when we played City and we beat them, and he adjusted to that, and we won. Like yeah, come, let's go again. But then he reverted back, and I don't mind you reverting, but sometimes switch up your tactics to depending on the game, because we don't have the personnel that you could just send out like we did in the 2002, 2003 era, or 2004-05, where you could just send them out and they'll play, and you could just leave them to play and they'll get you the result. We didn't have that type of player or that type of mentality. So Wenger for me, he struggled a lot. So yeah, I do feel like he outstayed his welcome. But now looking and having this talk and talking about the Emirates and everything, I understand why he was there as long as he was. So
I'm muted. Jason, go ahead.
I'm torn because I felt as though he had the chops to be in an executive position. I think I said it sometime in the past week in the Asylum. He should have been a similar role that he's playing now for FIFA within Arsenal, right? He's an ambassador. He could have done so many things. He's a player whisperer. How many people wouldn't have wanted to be able to communicate with Wenger, not be coached by him per se, but communicate with Wenger and still be at Arsenal? I think he was a pivotal figure that should have stayed in the club in some capacity. And it wasn't on the Cronkies on that situation. He just didn't gracefully transition. And in order to allow the next generation, I think my biggest quip is that the modern player has to be taught to an inch into what to do, right? Have you seen the Peps and the Klopps and a lot of Poch's teams, right? He taught these players how to think on the field. Wenger was more of a express yourself on the field type of guy, right? Like, let me just call it what it is. He was vibes. The modern player can't go off of vibes. These kids aren't built with the same structure, right? Like, again, I used to live in the UK, and we go back about this on the chat. You used to clean the boots of the elder players. There was a big kerfuffle when Beckham got kicked with the boot from Sir Alex Ferguson. That was the last time you ever saw that type of like humbling situation play out in the Premier League, because money came about and all these players ended up becoming egos. Cristiano Ronaldo's wearing white boots, and that was a bit of a big thing, right? When you wore white boots, you were saying you were the man to get kicked that day. The issue is that the modern day player isn't what Wenger is used to. The freedoms he allowed Ozil and Alexis to have, they were the last of that type of player to be able to be trusted. KDB, as brilliant as he is, he's probably one of the few players that reminds you of an old school type of number 10, Magista type player, but he's really, you know what I mean? He's the only player I can say that could probably be old school and new school. But if you look at a Raheem Sterling, right? As great as he can be, he functions in a system in which he doesn't have to think. He just has to be in spite positions. And because that's shifted, Wenger should have at least allowed himself to go in a boardroom position and facilitated a younger manager who has the time to be that nitpicky. Because if you're a vibes kind of guy, you can vibe from the boardroom. You can vibe when you're talking a transfer, but he stayed too long.
See, though, sorry, just to jump in there, sorry, before you, man. I feel that if Wenger went upstairs, I don't feel we get a Klopp or a Pep, because Wenger's too big of an icon for Pep and Klopp. So he'd need an Eddie Howe.
I definitely don't see. I agree with Steph. I don't see Arsene in any position at Arsenal that's not all consuming the manager, the coach, the recruiter, the this, because he's a quintessential authoritarian and he's a control freak. You know, so there's absolutely no way that he could have been in a situation where somebody was above him controlling transfers, and there's no way that he could have been controlling all the transfers and running the club and having a coach that would just be below him. Because like Steph said, he would have needed somebody that was just okay with being a coach. And the best managers that I feel like Arsenal deserve are more the Klopps, the Peps, you know, and they're not gonna, they would not be under Arsene Wenger. And yeah, so
under Karl-Heinz Rummenigge, like, you can't really say that. Like, Pep fell in line when the structure is bigger than you play into that system. Pep wasn't the boss man at Bayern. At no point in that you can't say that. So like I would love to believe what you're saying as an absolute truth, but we're all playing now and like like I'm just fantasizing. I would have loved Wenger to be able to be in a position to be able to shape a squad after his own molding, right? But like you're saying, he is that strong.
Yeah.
Come on now, like I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying that Pep fell in line when he was at Bayern. Look,
Mod, come in on this.
Yeah, so I don't know. I think you got to understand how Wenger was, and as much as an intellectual and a professor of the sport he was also egotistical. He had his ego. Even if you look at the players that he chose to be his number twos and the people that he chose to be number two and whatever, he went from he went for Steve Bold after Pat Rice left. And, Steve Bold was always, obviously he was our youth team manager at the time, but, he was hardly the most vociferous character. And he was never going to give Arsene Wenger any back chat or kind of go against the grain or tell Arsene that he was wrong. He was a yes man. So, I think Wenger was always very careful to mold teams. And if you look at all the characters that were big at Arsenal that he could have kept around, he didn't really. There's only one that he sort of kept around, and that was Thierry. He brought him back and he kept him around. But even then, when the players started to get a bit too big around the training ground, they were gone.
But isn't that like a thing, though? Fergie did the same thing. Yap Stam. Wasn't Beckham kicked out for the same reason, right? When they became a little bit too big.
Beckham was a different kettle of fish. Beckham was more, he couldn't understand and get with the whole commercial aspect, the whole, the guys out modeling on, spreading with his boxer shorts on a magazine. It was old school. But
Beckham was in boxers on in Hyde. What was he in Oxford Street with his boxers on?
Yeah, I mean, all of that, he couldn't really get his head around it. And he never thought that he was that good a footballer, to be honest, to be frank. He thought he was very effective, but, he couldn't quite get with the whole brand thing and everything else. The other thing about Wenger, going back to Wenger, which I heard from quite a few players at the time, is that, and you alluded to this as well, was Wenger on the training pitch and Wenger on the line, on the sideline, in the dugout, was always very, as you say, go out and express yourself. And he wanted the players to find their way through the match and think their way through the match. And you will very rarely hear him shouting instructions in the same way like Pep, or not even Pep, Arteta, let's say. Arteta even. He don't shut up. He doesn't shut up. You come here, blah, blah, blah. No, you got to be here, blah, 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 blah. Constantly giving instructions. Wenger wasn't that type of manager. But there were times when we needed that type of manager. And there were certain players within our squad that needed that type of manager.
100%.
And he wasn't it. And therefore, and I saw it with a lot of players that came and went that had a lot of potential. Some were like, FIFA under 21 and under 19 World Cup winners and all of that kind of stuff. And we got them into the club. I mean, even you look at what happened with Gnabry, with Serge. Should he have left the club? What happened there? That was a massive cock up.
Wasn't that an injury though?
Because everyone
tested and then he got injured right before. Remember that knee injury, right?
Serge.
So wasn't he playing him mad times in the preseason, and then he got injured? That season was a wash. Then the next season when he got healthy, then that was the Tony Pulis year
when he got loaned out. But the problem was
after he got injured, he got loaned out the next season to Tony Pulis.
Yeah, the problem was with Serge. Everyone knew that he was a generational talent in terms of Arsenal and what we had. Everyone knew. I remember going up to Barnet and watching him play week in and week out. I met him and his dad. And, everyone knew. Everyone could see. You could see it. You didn't need to be a football brain or a football genius to know what we had on our hands. But the whole situation was managed wrong. It was managed wrong. But again, someone alluded to it earlier. I can't remember which one, but Steve Rowley, I think it might be you, Jason, with the management of the youth and the management of the players and identifying the players that were needed either within the club or outside the club to go up to the first team was all wrong, and his ego got in the way. And also, I think personally, he was a bit xenophobic. Some may even say he was racist, and I heard players say that at the time, and I don't care. I'll say it here and now.
Who was racist?
Steve Rowley. So when they were saying that, the way that players were being managed, and also the way that players were being identified, and you alluded to it when you were talking about the Van Dijk situation and why he wasn't brought on. And he wasn't brought on because they couldn't understand his body language. It was like, oh, he looks too laid back on the ball. He's a bit lazy. Exactly, he's a bit lazy. They're not thinking that this guy could do it 1 or 2 touches, what most players need 3, 4, 5. He wasn't thinking that. He's just thinking, this guy's too laid back. Look at him. Who do you think he is strutting up the side of the pitch? We don't need him. Big mistake. And that was done. There was a catalogue of that. It was a whole generation of that, within the club.
I get that. Yeah.
It hurts to hear, bro. It hurts to hear.
I think, for me personally, I think he should have left after he won the FA Cup in 2014.
That's the first one, right?
That was the first one. I think he should have, because, look at Fergie. He left when things were good, and he didn't tarnish his legacy. And I understand there's people in the comments that are saying, like, you're forgetting how influential and how important Arsene Wenger is. I'm not forgetting that. I think he, there's so many things that he did to change the game. People talk about Pep ball like he's the first person ever to play free-flowing football, but like Arsene was a catalyst for that in the English Premier League. Like, this is not the first time we've seen that type of ball. And some of the things that he did, and the way that he kept the club together, for all those years is something that, I don't take for granted. My thing is that everything requires nuance and context, and he can be a legend and be phenomenal in his own way, but he could also have been culpable for some of the things that happened during that time. Both things can be true. That he had faults, but he was also a great manager. So that's why we're having this conversation, is not to batter Arsene. It's because, moving forward, we're talking about a rebuild, and it's important to know when you're rebuilding how you got to the place that you are in now. And that's why I wanted to have this conversation from different aspects and talk about the financial part of it, the injury part of it, things like that, the things that slip through the cracks, because a lot of times these years are just, thrown into a pile of the Cronkies. The Cronkies don't want to do anything. They don't want to do anything, but it's more than that. There's a lot of mistakes or a lot of things that have happened over the years that don't get talked about enough. And I hope.
Can I jump real quick? So because you have more background knowledge of players, right? Especially being on the TARP. Here's my question to you. In the football ecosystem, how many clubs have adjusted to manage players now that need their hands to be held, right? A lot of the times, like the loan system and, players getting adjusted to a new team. How has that changed? How has it changed maybe for Arsenal, if you know more specifically about our players, but like how many teams have evolved to be better at managing younger talents so they could feel as though they're valued, right? Because a lot of players pretty much say they don't feel as though they're important. As a result, they may go elsewhere. How do you feel about that?
I think it's difficult now. I think it's really difficult. I think things have changed somewhat. Years ago, obviously, if you look at like the first generations, which had the Thomases, the Rocastles, the Adams, all of those players, the Ray Parlers, the Martin Keon's, even the likes of Andy Cole, who started with us and then left and went to Newcastle, Man United, and blah, blah, blah. When you look at those kind of players, they came through the academy, they would have done anything just to play for the team. I think Rocastle's on record as saying they offered him whatever. He's like, yeah, just offer me whatever. I want to go out and play. Same as Keon. They weren't really interested. They just want to go out and play. Now, it's all different. It's commercialized. It's big business. You've got the agents involved. The agents now want to see progression. It's the same thing that we're talking about Balogun all the time and his contract negotiations and stuff. And the fact that his agency, Elite, that he's with, and who also represent the likes of Iwobi and also Eddie Nketiah and, most of the youngsters nowadays, they want to see some sort of route for progression. It's not good enough just to say, yeah, you're young, you're playing for the club that you love, you wait your turn. be happy and wait your turn. That's not good enough anymore, you know. So people are like, you know what? If I could do this, I could do that. I mean, that's why you've seen the likes of Jadon Sancho going over and playing for Borussia Dortmund. You know, players are just like, they're not waiting anymore. They'll go wherever they wanted. So things have changed now. And also, like, you look at the players. You look at, you know, we were talking about Aubameyang the other day. If you look at Aubameyang, you know, people back in the day would say, oh, he's too flash. Look at his gold, you know, Lamborghini, or, you know, this guy's his clothes and his bling and his tattoos and, you know, all the rest of it. And the fact that he's into art, buying art. Well, who does this guy think he is? Now, in the olden days, they'll be like, who the hell does this guy think he is? Nowadays, they need a player like that around. Like, Arsenal need him around. He's not captain just because he scores 30-odd goals a season. He's captain because of that as well. Not only his training, his professionalism, and the fact that the kids look up to him and they aspire to that. They aspire to that bling. They aspire to the fact that, you know, he's earning paper, but he's coming in on time, training hard, hardly ever gets injured, and then he could go on match day and bang in a hat trick, you know?
Yeah, that's definitely true. Well, you guys were at an hour and 15 minutes, so I want to stop the show here. Thank you guys so much for being a part of the show. I really appreciate it. And everybody in the chat, before you leave, make sure you like the video and subscribe to the channel. But remember, we're going to have some other guys from the Asylum on next week to talk about the rebuild. So now that we've talked about how we got here, we're going to talk about how we improve for the future. So make sure you're tuned in for that. And if you guys don't know, the WhatsApp group that I'm a part of, the Arsenal Asylum, also has their own podcast that's available. It's on Spotify, right, you guys? Or is it on Apple Pie?
It's on
Apple Pie? Is it on
Shots fired.
But it's on Apple Podcasts, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and I highly recommend it. So go ahead and follow them there. They're also on Twitter at Arsenal Asylum. And yeah, you guys, this was a really good show. Thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you guys on the next one.
Thank you. Love.
Cheers.